Saadia Zahidi is Managing Director at the World Economic Forum.
Extreme weather is still the #2 concern in the 2-year outlook, and climate risks are still the #1 risks 10 years out. But I think what's happened is there's so many other crises that are rising to the forefront. So mis and disinformation is one. Interestingly, the wider adverse effects of artificial intelligence are only at number 29 this year compared to 34 risks. But in the 10-year outlook, it rises to, I think, #6 in that time frame. And that's because mis and disinformation is only one aspect of what could happen around artificial intelligence, and people are quite concerned that we're going to be so distracted with the here and now that we're not putting enough effort into artificial intelligence governance.
Most of these programs today, tomorrow and the day after are full with the tragedy of wars in Ukraine, the Middle East and elsewhere. I mean, are you surprised that concern over these conflicts and others rank lower down?
So I think there's two things. One is geoeconomic confrontation, and I think in particular with the slightly more positive signals between the United States and China, that's fallen down in the rankings, the concerns around geoeconomic confrontation. But when it comes to interstate conflict, that has definitely gone up, and that's at #5 in the 2-year time frame. So there is concern around that kind of conflict, and then of course its broader repercussions with all of the borderless headlines that we see, and in addition what that means for global trade.
You see, the tragedy about this conversation is we've had years of hand-wringing, alarming reports on climate and wars and calls to action on climate change. And now AI. Nothing changes, does it? I mean, you can trot this report out. We'll be sitting here the same time next year discussing the same thing.
So I think it's a mix, right? What we're doing here is not making a prediction of the future. I think what we're saying here is we absolutely must stay focused on these risks, and we're getting 1,500 global experts to tell us what do they think is going to be most severe and what the likelihood of that is. So that's what we're starting to understand with this picture. But I think, as we say in several places in the report, this is not a prediction. The future is up to us. We decide how we handle some of these things, and especially when it comes to climate, I think the speed of that change, it's very interesting. Some of the business-related responses are saying this is a risk, but it's a little bit further out. Governments, civil society, much more concerned that this is here and now, and we need to be doing more around climate.
WEF's critics, of course, will point out that an unelected private plane-flying elite trying to lecture the world not only stinks of rank hypocrisy, but is part of the problem here, particularly when it comes to the global democratic deficit. I mean, they've got a point, haven't they?
I think what we're trying to do is create that stage, that platform where all of these different players can come together. And the theme of our meeting next year, or next week rather, is around rebuilding trust, because there has to be a lot more conversation between different parties around how we're going to tackle some of these things. There are some long-term intergovernmental political processes where a lot of that happens. So, for example, the meeting that just took place in the UAE around COP, that's where governments come together. What we then do is mobilize the private sector along with governments to be working in coalitions of the willing. So whether that's our First Movers Coalition, where businesses are procuring through their supply chains greener technologies, new innovations, or whether that's our initiatives like the Reskilling Revolution, where lots of different governments and businesses come together to provide people with better education and better skills and learning. So it's about building those coalitions, and we provide the research, like this report, and then, of course, providing some of the mechanisms through which these people can collaborate with each other.